a few more moments.
Take your time. Give it a chance. We only have one item on the agenda, so. Oh, and, well, I'll be quiet until things get started.
All right, we are now live on YouTube. You may begin.
Thank you very much. Hi, my name's John Keller. I'm chair of the Community Board 6's Health and Education Committee. I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:36 p.m. This evening on November 24th, 2020. And we are joined tonight not only by our district manager, Jesus Perez, but by the chair of Community Board 6, Kyle Atide. So we're very, very grateful to both of you for being here. We do need a volunteer, as always, to take the minutes of tonight's meeting. If anyone could do that. Otherwise, I will put together a brief summary of the meeting because I know no one else has been asked to. No one was asked in advance to do it, and I actually don't have, I would have until the January meeting to get it done. So I'd be happy to do the minutes myself. Am I allowed to do the minutes, Jesus, as chair?
You can, but we encourage members to do that because there are a lot of demands on the time of the committee chairs.
Yeah, I'm looking at who's here. Abby, would you be able to do the minutes? Abby, can't hear you.
Yeah, I can do it.
Would you that would be fine. And, summary minutes are always fine with me, especially since we have the recording of the meeting. So, Abigail Kruzmark, Vice Chair of the Health and Education Committee, will take the minutes for tonight's meeting. And thank you very much, Abby, for doing that. I guess Jesus, could you conduct the roll call and take the roll of the attendance tonight?
Sure thing. Committee members, good evening. I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. John Keller.
Here.
Thank you. Abigail Kruzmark.
Present.
Thank you. Asia Badi.
Present.
Thank you. Elby Barroso.
Present.
Thank you. Dan Devine. Dan Devine, please keep in mind that I can't see you all, so if you are here, please state so. All right, Rich Mintz. Rich Mintz. Phil Napolitano.
Present.
Thank you. Seema Shah.
Present.
Thank you. Sean Sherman. Sean Sherman. Anju Suresh.
Present.
Thank you. Claude L. Winfield.
Present.
Thank you. Neil Barkley. Neil Barkley. All right, we do have quorum.
Oh, good, great, thank you. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and appears on the screen before you. You can see it's a straightforward agenda with one major topic. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, please raise your hand through Zoom, or just if we can see you, raise your hand. And seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. And the minutes from the October 27th meeting were also distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. And seeing no objection, the minutes from the October 27th meeting are adopted. and they will soon be available on the CB6 website. And before I introduce our guest here, let me just lay down some ground rules that we do at all of our committee meetings as well as at the full board meeting. We're a small group, so we tend to be a little flexible on this, but in general, we ask people, the committee members, to ask to be recognized until granted the floor, but I'm not going to, fall over on that. Committee members, if you have a question, this is important, however, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you click the participants icon, the participants panel should appear and you'll find the raise hand function. If you still have technical difficulty, you may click the chat icon and relay your difficulty. But the chat function should not be used for committee business. That's what's important here. Or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. We shouldn't have side discussions in the chat room, especially since members of the public cannot, or because members of the public do not have access to that. Chat should only be used to alert us to a technical difficulty you're having, or to state an information in writing, such as an email address that was stated aloud on the record during the meeting. When the committee member is given the floor to speak, I'll identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. If you don't think I've seen you, just raise your hand and make a commotion and I will recognize you as you're a member of the committee. We are required by executive order to create a verbatim transcript of the meeting, so please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion for Abby's sake as she takes the minutes. The order of the adopted agenda, I'm told here, should be followed, so we will. So the first item on our agenda tonight is a discussion of COVID-19 and school reopenings. Then we have chair's report and old and new business, and in old and new business, I will certainly give our board chair, Kyle and Tide, a chance to make any comments that he might make at that time, or any time you want to speak, Kyle. So tonight, if you have kids in the New York public school system, or you read the newspapers, or you listen to the media, or you're otherwise conscious in New York City, you're aware that there is considerable discussion about how the school reopening process has been going and ongoing in the city. And as you all know, just last Thursday, the mayor announced that or last Wednesday, the mayor announced that schools would be closed for in-person learning, at least through the end of Thanksgiving. And I know from emails that we've received that we have members of the public who are very interested in weighing in on this and commenting on this. But to bring a little bit of expertise to tonight's meeting, I'm very, very happy that Len Silverman has made the time to join us. Len is a member of the Community Education Council for District 2, but also is a member of the Chancellor's Parents Advisory Committee called CPAC, and he is president of the District 2 President's Council, which is the presidents of all the PTAs in District 2 across Manhattan. And you're either current or past president of the East Side Middle PA, and I think you have a role at another middle school in the district. So Len is here, and once again, I'm going to remind people who, something I already said, don't attack Len. Len is an advocate who is as opposed and concerned about many of the things that are going on right now in our schools. But he is here as someone who's right on top of information related to what's happening in our schools. And so he's been kind enough to take time out from his evening to come here and speak to us and give us an update as to what's going on. So without further ado, Len Silverman.
So first, I want to thank you, John. Every time I have the opportunity to address Community Board 6 Educational Council, I seem to have a different title. As John is correct, I am a former two-time PTA president of Eastside Middle School and of Lower Lab. I have 3 kids in the New York City public school system, one that's graduating from Baruch High School this year. We're not sure where he's going to end up. Another student at the Bronx High School of Science, who's a sophomore, and I have a third grader at PS 158. So I'm in the system for a while. I'm familiar with a lot of different issues, from anything from IEPs to gifted and talented programs, ESH, SAT. So any questions that I can answer, I'm happy to do so. So as John said, there are three particular areas. I'm going to broaden it a little from the agenda. Right now, there are three particular areas that are really of serious interest, and I should say, bit more concern to New York City public school parents. And the first, obviously, is that for those of you who don't know, New York City public schools are currently closed. This is a school-wide shutdown, and there have been minor, or I should say smaller, shutdowns up to this point. So for example, PS 158, which for those of you who don't know is located on 78th Street and York Avenue, that's where my son goes to third grade, that's been shut down for 2.5 weeks already because they had a positive COVID test, or 2 positive COVID tests. So the first issue that is confronting parents is this uncertainty about when schools are going to reopen. And there really has not been much guidance on that issue. So to give you an overview in terms of why they closed, and I'm going to really be very general about this, I'm going to ask John to please interrupt me if I'm giving any inaccurate information. But as some of you may have heard, there was an agreement with the UFT and the City of New York whereby if the positive test results went above, I think it's 3%, you would have schools closed. Now, that sounds like it's a very reasonable agreement, but the most recent testing numbers that I'm aware of show a 0.22% positivity rate inside New York City schools. I asked Deputy Chancellor Adrian Austin, at the last CPAC meeting last week. I said, can you give me one example of a single case of someone getting COVID transmitted from a student to student, teacher to teacher within a school building? And she said she would have to get back to me. She wasn't sure about that. So you have a number of parents, and when I mean a number, I mean potentially tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands, that are very upset about this. And this decision to close schools is coming on top of a decision by the mayor to restrict the time period in which parents had the option of choosing blended or fully remote learning. Blended learning is a combination of the students go to school certain days of the week, and then the rest of their course instruction is given online. And remote learning or fully remote learning is exactly what it sounds like. The student does not go to school at all, and they receive remote instruction. Right now, the latest numbers that I'm aware of that we heard last week are there 60,000 New York City school students that have no access to any type of device that will allow them to receive any type of educational instruction. That is an absolute outrage. That is a horror. And they're trying to address that right now. But the fact that this first started in March, and we're facing the situation of children in shelters, children who don't have access to Wi-Fi, kids who are not getting any instruction, it's just horrible. There's also a feeling amongst parents, particularly in School District 2, which is the school district that runs from 96th Street all the way, loops around Lower Manhattan through Tribeca. There is a feeling that remote instruction is not working. Certainly not a substitute for live instruction. So we've had a lot of parents in our district that really want to see more live, in-person school instruction. And by the way, any view that I express now, it's not. It's just my personal view. It's not the view of the District 2 President's Council. It's not the view of CPAC. These are my personal views. I just want to make that clear. So those are the primary issues related to school closures. But there are a few other issues I just want to bring up very briefly, and that's the admission situation that is also being impacted by COVID. So for those of you who don't know, public school parents have to make decisions starting in 4th grade where your child, if your child is going through a K through 5 school, where your child is going to go to middle school. So the way that those admissions have been done in the past is you look at 4th grade GPAs, 4th grade, or I should say grades, I don't know about GPAs, but you look at grades, and then you also look at test results. And that would be on the math tests for 4th grade and the ELA, English Language Arts exam. And as you can imagine, we haven't had those tests, and we didn't have those tests last year. So there's an incredible amount of uncertainty in terms of what the rubrics are going to be, how those decisions are going to be made for where, what schools are going to accept people, what the standards are that are going to be used. And also tying into that, you also have the uncertainty focused around two other areas, and that is the SHSAT, which is the Specialized High School Admissions Test, which is the test that that allows for admission to 7 of the 8 specialized high schools, the other one being the Performing Arts School, LaGuardia, that doesn't use the SHSAT. But you're talking about schools like Bronx Science and Stuyvesant, and normally the test would have been given by this time of year. So there's a feeling, certainly among parents in our district, that there's a delay tactic or there's an uncertainty of whether or not that test is going to be given. There's been some discussion about doing it remotely. I'm not sure what's happening. In terms of the admissions, as I mentioned earlier, we were supposed to have answers by July, and the Department of Education has continually delayed any decisions, any guidance on those issues. And finally, with regard to where kids are going to go to school, is the gifted and talented schools. And for those of you who are not familiar, in order to gain admission into a gifted and talented school, parents will have 4-year-olds who are usually tested. You're tested going into first grade. And then you can also have the option of retesting when you're in first grade, but most parents do it in their kindergarten year. And this is a little more difficult because these tests are administered one by one. So I would argue there's certainly more issues related to COVID in terms of safety and security and how these tests are administered. But the reality is no one really knows what's going to happen. So you have a lot of schools that are looking at the possibility of not having a class next year. Now, for those of you who are conspiracy buffs, and I'm sure we don't have any of you on Community Board 6, there are those people certainly in our district who feel that the mayor and the chancellor are in fact using this or using COVID-19 as cover to kind of tweak their admissions enrollments and to change the process of gifted and talented and to push back on the specialized high school admissions test, all to promote equity, which is certainly something that's very important, and you hear a lot about that. And I am certainly an advocate of we need more equity in the system. But there's certainly a concern among parents in District 2 that, and I think the mayor actually said, it was either the mayor or the chancellor said, let's not waste a good crisis. It's statements like those that make parents a little suspicious about what's going on. So those are the other issues that directly relate to COVID. And there's one more issue, John's going to hate me for this, but I'm just going to throw it out there. It's not an issue right now, but trust me, a year from now, when things settle down, it will be an issue for this committee or that our parents in our district will be interested in. And that's the CRSE, or Culturally Responsive Sustaining Education. And that is a change in the curriculum that is going to be exactly what it sounds, more culturally responsive, but it's a lot more progressive and radical than I think most people imagine. So I think that when things settle down, you will start to hear from parents like, is this really being taught in my son or daughter's classroom? That's going to be an issue that's coming down the pike, but again, not for a year. But but I don't have any answers. We're very frustrated. There are many districts, and I have the opportunity as a member of CPAC to hear from districts all around the city. But there's the frustration of not knowing when schools are going to reopen. There's a discussion maybe after Thanksgiving we'll get some guidance, which would be fantastic. I think there's some pushback now on to renegotiate or certainly change the terms of the UFT agreement that requires that schools be closed if the citywide numbers go over a certain amount. But that requires parent input, it requires feedback, it requires community action. And that's where I'd like to hear from everyone here. And I'd like to know your feelings so I can take them back to the chancellor and as well. But I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you for letting me ramble. I apologize if I spoke too long, but any questions that you might have, I'm here to answer. One last thing I would just tell you, we're getting a new superintendent in District 2. So there will be a new superintendent, district superintendent. Donalda Chumley is leaving. She's going out of state to take a position, and we're going to have an opening in our district. So that's another thing that's going on in our district. It affects the students who are within the geographic confines of District 2 and any members of or parents of Community Board 6 that happen to live within those geographic confines. So that's another issue. And there'll be a process of trying to find a replacement fairly soon for Ms. Chumley. Any questions?
First of all, thank you very much, Len. Let me use the hand raise function for members of the committee with any questions or comments they might want to make, and you can also just make a comment to Len, and then we'll open it up to. We have a number of attendees that I know have expressed interest in the subject. But first of all, any member, I'll just be quiet because I could ramble to Len at any time. So.
John, this is one of those awkward moments where no one has a question.
Yeah, Len, do you get a sense at all, of the?
I raised my hand.
Oh, I do see a hand.
And Claude, please introduce yourself to Len and so that he knows the role you've played in our schools over the years. Thanks.
My name is Claude Winfield. I'm a former principal many years ago, and former vice chair of the community board. I have a question about the supplying the kids with adequate access to education, because when you say 60,000 kids don't have access, and even if they did have access, they might not have Wi-Fi. And even if they did have Wi-Fi and access, they might not have the parents' support to access the computers when they're working on them. I'll give you a little anecdote. My granddaughter was visiting with me, and she attends Hunter Elementary School. She was supposed to go on at 8:45. And so we're letting her do her own stuff because, she only comes once a week. But we're letting her do her own stuff. And she's sitting there and we're waiting for her to go on. The teacher comes on about 9 o'clock. And she says, she takes the roll and she says, "I'll be back with you in an hour." And the first thing I thought was, where's the supervision? Who's monitoring what's going on with these kids? Not only at home, but from the other end, from the instruction. Because if the person that's doing the teaching doesn't show up for an hour, what are your kids doing all day? So I have a major concern about that. And I saw something else. Maybe you can either validate it or not. I read somewhere that somewhere in the contract of the people that are supplying the laptops to the schools, that there was something missing which does not allow the laptops to leave the schools if the schools are closed in this situation. So they can't be removed from the school with the students. Do you know anything about that?
Okay, so let me take the first part of your question. I just think everyone should know that's here tonight that when we say remote instruction, if you don't have a child in the system, you tend to think, okay, remote instruction is really going to be, there's going to be a teacher in front of a computer screen, and they're going to give you live instruction. And basically anything that happened in the classroom during the day, the teacher's just going to be doing it in front of their own computer screen or a camera. And you're going to get basically like a full day's worth of instruction. And basically anything that happened in the classroom is now going to happen in the online environment. And that's not the case. So first, there are rules that the UFT has in terms of the number of live instructional periods. I think it's limited to 2 right now. So as much as you would like to actually have a teacher teaching, let's say, more than a certain number of live periods, there's asynchronous instruction periods now they're trying to expand, but it's not like you're getting the same amount of time that you got before. And Claude, you bring up a really good point, and I know it from having a third grader, that you need somebody to actually sit there and put somebody on, make sure they're actually doing what they're supposed to do, which requires timing. And people are at home. I'm at home working. I mean, you're lucky you're only getting a child 1 day a week. And it's very difficult. And we've missed sessions. And then if you have children with IEPs, like my third grader does, or individualized education plans, you got multiple things that you have to juggle, and we're missing things. It's just very complicated. And the horror is that you have parents who are not that organized, who don't have access to resources, who don't have fantastic Wi-Fi or even Wi-Fi at all, where they have slow internet connections, And these kids are literally staring at walls right now. They're not getting any instruction. And I can tell you, even with a third grader, you miss a day, it's problematic. You miss a week, it's very troubling. You miss 2 weeks, it starts to get critical. You miss a month to a year, we're talking about kids that either are going to have to repeat a full year of school or they're going to fall behind. And no one is following up on those type of kids. And that's why they changed the grading policies also. So the grading policies play directly into this lack of accountability, as you mentioned. So
I hope it's not acceptable that, or it's a given that these kids have lost instruction for a whole year already.
I hate to say, I think it is a given. And I think that the teachers are I honestly think they're trying to do the best they can. But in many ways, I think this is literally it's an atrocity unfolding right in front of our eyes, with people, just kids falling behind, kindergartners, first graders, second, third, all the way up to 12th graders, who are looking at maybe graduating, and lacking basic fundamental education. And it's really problematic.
To my second question, how does someone like you put pressure on the Board of Ed to get those laptops to the kids?
Okay, so to answer your second part of your question, I haven't heard, so for example, I know even though the buildings are technically closed, there are people going into the buildings. I can tell you PS 158 because kids are getting school lunches. So anybody that needs a lunch, and I want you to make sure your community knows this, that if there's any member that wants anyone that has a student that needs a school lunch, they can go right into, or breakfast, you can go right into certain schools. They're still open. You can still get those meals. That should be publicized for members of Community Board 6. They should know that. So the schools are open. So I do believe that you can get a laptop. There is a help. There are the technicians that are in certain schools right now that can assist in some of the technical support issues. So I haven't heard about not having access to laptops while the schools are closed. So the schools really, and also there are first responders children through certain programs that are actually receiving some sort of, I understand, some sort of combination of live blended learning as well, because there's just no, but again, we're talking very small percentages of New York City school students. But it is the way that what we can do as a community, what Community Board 6 can do, is, again, we are strong when we stand together. You have to focus on the networks that you have. You have to talk to parents. You have to make sure that people understand who their elected officials are, who their representatives are. You'd be amazed how many people still don't know who those people are, who represents you, your assembly man, woman, your council member, and to talk to those people, to focus on so many different areas, to work with your local parents association. Again, there's strength in numbers. One person's not going to do it. One complaint's not going to do it. I mean, I have heard of lawsuits. That's another possibility. But again, those are going to take time to work their way through the system. And they're not going to bring about the critical change that we need right now. But as a community, we need to mobilize. We need to demand answers and say, look, you've had time to prepare. We know it's difficult. We know there's a lot of uncertainty. In many ways, they've done an admirable job, but they're failing in many other ways. And there's going to be, I fear that there's going to be tens of thousands of kids, maybe even more, that it could be even hundreds of thousands of kids that are just not receiving any worthwhile education this year. And that's a real horror. That is a horror.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
It's Andrew has it.
Hi, Andrew. Go ahead.
Hi. Well, firstly, thank you for coming in, Lynn, and kind of giving us a breakdown. A comment and a question. So one thing, the first thing that came to mind last week when they announced that the schools were closing, and it's to your point of like parents essentially having to work 2 jobs, is really bringing to light that nearly like 1 million women, more probably since then, since March, have like dropped out of the workforce, like 1 in 4, because of like lack of childcare and because of the crisis in these schools. So an unintended consequence of all of this as well, which is really concerning. The question I did have, it's a very basic one. So we're above the 3% rate right now. Is there any indication that if we drop below 3%, that these schools would reopen, or is it that now that we've hit this trigger, there's no reversing it, it's just going to be closed until further notice?
Okay, first, in terms of your comment, I think it's a great, you make a great point. I mean, it's not a great situation right now. In terms of your question, I think this is my answer. I think you're starting to see that the discrepancies between the governor and the mayor's position, you're starting to see that pushback politically. Certainly the UFT seems to be kind of putting feelers out there that maybe the numbers, if they go up to a certain point, I think if you read the letter of the agreement, my understanding is, once you're above that 3%, and there's no indication that the numbers are going down. If anything, the numbers are probably going to keep on ticking up, maybe not enormously, but they're going to keep on ticking up. And that's a cause for concern. The question is, will there be a revision where somebody says, let's look at the numbers in schools as opposed to the numbers in the city? Because, I've brought this up many times, it's very upsetting to me that my child's not in school, but if I walk down 2nd Avenue, I'm seeing people sitting without masks, not even 6 feet away with each other in these shelters they've constructed, or eating inside, or people at bars, people going to gyms. So how do you, and the way they're pushing back at that is, oh, we'll be closing those too. That's what they're saying. We'll be closing those eventually also. But it's kind of disturbing when you see this double standard. So I think we're going to need to have a change in the numbers that are used before you're going to see schools, before you're going to see the schools reopen, unless the numbers suddenly drop, unless, like, as you say, the numbers, but again, they're looking at rolling averages. So they're looking at a number of days. It's not just if it drops one day, it has to drop for like 5 days or 8 days before they're willing to take that chance. Because, people may not be symptomatic and they're only testing random numbers of people. It's possible the numbers in schools are even higher. But the interesting thing is I read a statistic that 26% of New York City Department of Education employees have medical waivers now. So anybody who, that's an unbelievable number if you think about it. So I would like to think that the people who are really older or have pre-existing conditions are not in our school buildings. But to answer your question, I don't think it's going to suddenly all of a sudden turn around and there's going to be a number that they're going to pick out of a hat. I think maybe there'll be some renegotiation and someone will say, okay, maybe if the positivity rate goes up to 1% or until it hits 1% in schools or even 2% in schools, then we're going to leave things open. Because you're right. My wife works from home. I work from, we can't leave. Even if I wanted to, which I don't, but even if I wanted to go back to work, I couldn't do it because I'm stuck here. And not that school should be childcare, but the practical reality is having a child in school allows you to do other things, especially if you have a small child. So again, on your first point, very well taken. And you're never going to get people going back to work, and you're never going to get the city restored to its function. You're never going to get the people filling those downtown, midtown office spaces if they can't leave their homes. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So you're never going to get the city restored to the way it needs to be fully functional when the educational system isn't working.
And I see Azia has her hand up, but Azia, if you would introduce yourself to Len as a parent of public
Hi, Len. Thanks so much for coming. I'm actually former chair of health and education and vice chair of the board, and I do have 2 kids one who went through the public school system. One's in high school and private now, but the other one's still in G&T education downtown. So thanks so much. I really appreciate it. I saw that Traeger and Johnson actually came out with a suggestion around what the schools should do, focusing on in-person elementary education and not for middle and high school. I don't know. I haven't read through it because I'm just curious, like, have you seen a response from anywhere or any other sort of what position what people think of that proposal?
I'm very glad you brought stuff like that up because I just want to give you all, there's a way of looking at things on a micro level and there's a way of looking at things on a macro level. I'm going to give you the macro view on this whole thing. So what you're talking about is, proposals by elected officials, clearly with an eye towards a progressive agenda or, moving things, changing the way things are working now. So I just want to say, I think there's a feeling, there's an undercurrent that there's a desperation out there. And I think there's an understanding that if we don't make changes now, that certain elected officials feel if we don't make these changes at this point, if you can't make the changes when you can't necessarily test somebody, you've had all these barriers to rubrics that are out there, then when are those changes ever going to take place? So I think that's why you're seeing this push for ideas and legislation, particularly by what we might consider more progressive legislators or council members, to try to change this fundamental way the system is run. So I haven't seen any particular response, though.
So John, sorry, I'm just going to say, so maybe it might be worth our committee's time to think of a response to that and say like, or add to it, because if people are coming up with ideas, we should be able to come up with a response or better ideas, right?
In fact, what this is going to get us off target. And Phil, I noticed you had your hand up before, because I wanted to address that exactly. But Phil, you had your hand up. Did you take it down for a reason, or do you still have a comment?
Mr. Silverman and Anju touched upon the question that I was going to ask. So I'll pass, but thank you.
All right. Azia's point is good, and I'm going to ask, since Jesus is here, and we have the wealth of experience of Azia and Kyle, as you know, their roles on the board over the years. If I would like to put together a resolution actually for the next full board meeting, and Jesus, if I do that, could we meet right before the next full board meeting as a committee? What are the logistics of that in relation to the points such as Azia was just making, and also more generally just taking a very strong position as a board on what Len has been describing here?
Well, Azia or whatever board member who wants to put forth a motion to write such a resolution would clearly state that motion. And like that would be the basis of the resolved clause of that resolution. And then the committee would discuss it. And if the committee is in agreement and votes on it, then that resolution can then be drafted amongst you all and preferably be ready by early December so that it can be ready to put forward at December's full board.
So would we need to actually have someone, I'm sorry to take it up just with parliamentary procedure here, but would someone need to make a motion here this evening that we draft a resolution in advance of the next board meeting, or how does that work?
Yes, someone would. And it does look like Kyle has his hand up. He would like the floor.
Kyle.
Yeah, another suggestion I was going to make too is we did this in the spring with the outdoor dining because obviously everything was moving very quickly. So we actually held another meeting in advance of the full board meeting so that we could have something put together. So you can call another meeting. Obviously, it would have to be public, and you'd have to work with the staff and the committee to make sure that people can join to discuss whatever resolution is put together. Alternatively, and it's a little more difficult, so it might not necessarily what you want, but it would be equivalent to caucusing during the full board, where you would have either a meeting right before the full board or kind of like a breakaway session during the board, but I'm not sure about the logistics of that. So those are some options that you have if you want to put something together and then discuss it before the next full board.
Yeah, I was thinking of if there's a consensus on the committee here that we have it would be a very simple resolution. I mean, but it would, but if there's a consensus here that we do that, then if we could get this committee to meet 10 minutes before the full board meeting in December, to vote on it, that's the sort of thing I was thinking of doing, if that's possible. And I'll volunteer to write the resolution, but I can't make the motion as chair to do that.
John, can I just say something for a moment?
Sure.
I mean, you've been very gracious. Let me yap this much. I just want to say there's a real vacuum in terms of, and a real opportunity here for for Community Board 6, because there really is a vacuum in terms of leadership. People are so fractured right now, and we feel as if we're remote, we're not organized. Yeah. So if you guys, whatever you guys decide, whether, whatever your position is on whatever issue, you really do have an opportunity to say something, and to say it and mean something, and to make a difference here, because there's so few community boards actually engaging on these issues, and you're losing people. I mean, that's another thing I want to mention. People are leaving the city. I mean, we're looking at my son's school. They've lost an entire class, or one class per grade. You're talking about, I've heard 50 to 100 families for each school in District 2. So that's thousands of, we're talking thousands of people are leaving our neighborhoods. These are families with kids packing up and saying, I've had it, I'm done. This uncertainty, I can't take it. These parents.
So logistically, then, could someone make a resolution? And I'm writing this on the fly here.
Kyle would like the floor.
Okay.
Sorry again. But it's just building on the point that Len just made, which is an excellent one. And obviously something that we've discussed very extensively is about being proactive on a lot of these issues and really taking the stand and making sure that we're putting out what we want as a committee and as a board and as a community, and leading that charge in terms of, dictating the conversation and really shaping it around the needs that we have. So John, again, this goes to you as chair. Like, if you want to do something more substantive, if you want more discussion around it, obviously would have to do something in advance, more than 5-10 minutes before the meeting. So it kind of goes up to you what exactly you're looking for this. It could be something more substantive that the committee decides that we want to take a lead on and, obviously garners more discussion, or we can kind of take the, the little steps to build up to something bigger. So I will defer to you as the chair of the committee on what approach you'd like to take, and obviously to the rest of the committee as well.
Okay, so let's limit this discussion because it's getting late. We have members of the public that want to speak. But what I would like to, if someone were to make a resolution that the committee, this committee at the December full board meeting have drafted a resolution in relation to the crisis facing public education in New York City today. That we would have drafted a resolution along those lines, citing examples such as Azia has pointed out. I'm happy to play a major role in drafting that, but I can't make that resolution. Is there anyone who would make a resolution to that effect?
I make the motion.
Okay, so Azia has moved that we prepare a resolution.
But can I make a comment, John? My only concern is that I think that our resolution should be reflective of what we're hearing. And there are other comments from some parents here.
Oh yeah, no, I want to hear the parents very quickly.
So I know there's a rush because, I mean, our kids this year is just going crazy, but I would want to make sure our resolution has all the points that needs to be. And then it would be really great to, to make sure we can encompass all the needs in a way that, that we have a strong resolution. So I just don't want to rush it and have not really engaged with our community about it. So that's my only hesitation.
So are you hesitating about having it for the December meeting then, or?
Because right now then we'll go based on what we discuss here in some ways, and it would be good to get some input from the community. We haven't, Len, I appreciate that your son's at Baruch, but we haven't talked to families in our elementary schools. We haven't talked to what's going on in our, other things. So I think it's worth at least saying that we have engaged with our elementary schools. We have talked to parents. This is what they are asking for us, so that as CB6, we're speaking from, our community, and we've given them a chance to actually make it part of a December meeting where they've actually had input.
Yeah, but realistically, since the December meeting is in less than 2 weeks, it would be hard to. What is the date of the December meeing?
December 9th.
Pardon? December
9th.
Is it realistic for us to have something like that put together by the 9th? I guess, and Azia, you're suggesting it might not be.
A resolution, or just a fact that we do in December ask the parents for feedback,
So that we,
and because we are supposed to say on public comment a possible reso, we can do things immediately if we feel that it's necessary and it comes up as a part of the topic of discussion. But it's worth saying that we're doing a possible resolution on our comments on these suggestions, and get community feedback.
So the point would be to have a period for community feedback at the December 9th meeting, on this topic with someone like Len, who's ducking away right now, with someone like Len coming and, making some comments perhaps.
But we also have had parents like PS 116 PTA have joined Parks and Landmarks because they were really engaged on the St. Barton's renovation, and they have a very engaged group of parents that have already gotten involved on the St. Barton's redesign. I'm sure that they all have commentary on.
And I know with PS 59 we got very engaged with.
Yeah, so I think
street.
I unless you think that there's a reason for us to rush it, I do think we'd have a richer reso.
Okay.
And we should if we're speaking for the community, we should not be speaking in a vacuum of just the people who came today, or at least engage with the folks that are attendees, the 6 other attendees, but also invite for public comment.
Okay, so we'll proceed like that, and I don't think we need a formal resolution of this committee to do that at the December meeting. Okay.
John, to help spread the word, we can put something in the newsletter, maybe come up with a little item saying, hey, if you have some thoughts on this, please write into the CB6 office. Or since you have sort of mentioned a survey, I mean, we can mock a version of that survey up that can be easily taken by parents at home. Our newsletter goes out on December 1st. And, we have almost 3,000 subscribers in the community to our newsletter. And we can even.
And I've already mocked up a survey, so that's
we can
okay, so let's, we have members of the public who are, I know, anxious to speak. I've had one note already in the Q&A from Jen Saran, for example, who has a couple of questions that she would like to raise. So unless members of the committee, and I know that Lauren Connolly, a resident of Stuyvesant Town, has asked to speak here tonight. So unless members of the committee have urgent matters that they would like to raise on this topic at this point, I would like to open this to questions and comments from members of the public, if that's agreeable to the committee. Okay, so so members of the public in attendance here, I know at least 2 of you have identified yourselves, Jen and Laura, as having issues of interest, and anyone else who's in attendance. And typically we allow 3 minutes. 3 minutes for commentary, but we can be flexible on that. And Len, if you're free to leave, Len, if you want, or if you want to hang around and listen, but we certainly appreciate very much your.
You guys are great. I'll stick around.
Great, that's great. Okay, all right. So Jesus, how do we recognize members of the public who want to be want to speak?
Oh, sorry, I was unmuted there. So we should go with Ms. Saran first, because it does look like she has questions and comments on the agenda topic.
Excellent.
And then we'll go in order of how they were received. As for Ms. Connolly, she is speaking on a separate topic, and so she will be acknowledged during new business.
Fine. And then Ms. I apologize for mispronouncing your name, Catherine Farquharson. Also looks like you have a comment on the student meal plans and food insecurity, which are definitely related to the topic. And then Ms. Connolly, we will get to you during the new business section, if that's agreeable. Okay, so Jesus, how do you allow?
So as for Ms. Saron's, so she typed out her questions and comments. Do you want to read those aloud for the record? Or do you want her to?
Why don't we give her a chance to speak herself, rather than me just repeat what she wrote, so that, because it might be better for her to speak in her own words on a topic that's important to her.
All right, Ms. Saran, can you state your question and identify yourself and your affiliation?
My name is Jen Saran. I live in Murray Hill, parent of 2 East son. I science instructor, pre-K through undergrads, New York State educational advocate, former legislative co-chair of AGAT, Association of Advocacy for Gifted and Talented Education in New York State. The first thing I was concerned about is something that we're all concerned about. The business community, someone cited 60,000 children missing computers in New York City. That's unacceptable. And has the business community been involved? Is there anyone on Community Board 6, you know, my community board, who is trying to help? And, you know, as a part of a resolution, it might be very useful to ask that business community be involved in providing these things. They could do this so quickly, maybe, in the way that the DOE could not, in terms of requisitioning computers. So the second thing, as a gifted and talented advocate for 5 years, but with a son who is twice exceptional, there is a great need to have multiple measures of success in regard to evaluating a child's entrance to gifted and talented programs, to specialized high schools, to all sorts of access that most children in this city do not currently have, because they cannot pay for someone to prepare their child for a test. Now, I think it's really important that in this crisis, we acknowledge the potential benefits of multiple measures that are going to be needed to evaluate children for entrance to these schools, and that this could be a benefit, that it might not need to be a horrible thing happening. And the last thing is, this crisis could be an opportunity to include children and empower children, rather than seeing this as a horrible thing that the teachers aren't teaching them every moment of the day. We could conceivably look at this as an opportunity to include children and empower children in their own educational progress, and focus on individual interest and talent development during this downtime, with an encouragement for out-of-school mentoring set up, using learning leaders and maybe other existing mentor networks to provide a connection between the community and our children and parents at home.
I mean, you've done a great job. What you've just addressed is an extremely important issue, and I'm so happy to hear the phrase "twice exceptional" used. My kid is at one of the specialized high school, Stuyvesant, and you know, we have just created a committee for twice exceptional to deal with the needs and issues of twice exceptional children. And so I think your comments are really very timely, and just encourage you to get, I mean, it sounds like you already are engaged, but Len is here from the Community Education Council for District 2, who is, you know, deeply involved with these issues with the DOE. So Len, meet Jen, Jen, meet Len, and, you know, hopefully, you know, this could lead to a very productive collaboration. And the topic you raise is so big that we're not gonna, we couldn't cover it tonight, but it's just already bubbling to the top at a lot of our schools. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Len, is it okay? Is your email address a public? Would you mind?
I actually have to get my wallet to tell you my CEC email address, but any one of you can contact me anytime you want. It's very simple. It's I'll type it here in the I'll type it in the chat so it's available for anyone. I'm always happy to talk to any parents that need any help, any way I can assist you. I'm happy to do it. You know, it's a very important topic. I think the question was great. The commentary was great. I think the default is that the city is looking at going away from gifted and talented programs, shifting away and more towards enrichment programs and more towards specialized classes or instruction. So I'm not sure if if they want to maintain the current system as it exists. I do agree about we need more entry data points. It shouldn't really be one test necessarily that controls for this. And there's definitely the inequities in the lack of resources that parents have. That's again an equity issue that's been around for a long time, and that really needs to be addressed here. And that's something that I think the city needs to do a better job preparing kids for those tests.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, so it's a good connection made, and it's a very important topic. And then we had another question about related to, I'm sure it's still up here.
John, it looks like
student meal plans and food insecurity by Ms. Farquharson.
John, before we get to that question, it looks like Abby would like the floor.
Oh, okay. Abby, go ahead.
I just wanted to quickly follow up on Jen's point about devices and liaising with the business community and ask Len if that's happening. And if it isn't, if you think that it would be more productive for that liaison to go through the DOE or to be separate, or what would that look like?
So I'm not sure. Could you like kind of just elaborate a little more what you mean? I'll be happy to.
Well, Jen
sure. So in terms of devices for 60,000 students, connectivity, is there any conversation? Right.
Well, here's the problem. It's not only just the device, it's that it has to have certain software installed on it. It has to be, you have to make sure there's nothing inappropriate that's on the device. There are security issues there. So it's not just a question of, okay, somebody has an old laptop, you can just donate it and someone will take it. And things are, if you look at the laptops that they distribute in schools, there's a uniformity to them. Schools tend to all have the same type of laptop, and I think that's for a reason. So I don't know if there's any individuals, any business members of the community that are involved in this. That's a great thing to look into. I'll try to get an answer from District 2 for you. But a lot of this is people have resources, they don't know how to get it to the people that have the resources. And then even when they want to do it, there's so many roadblocks in terms of the requirements and the laws and the regulations that it just makes it very difficult to do. So I will look into that for you. You have my word. I will follow up on that and see if there's a way to get some feedback about maybe getting the community involved to either purchase systems. But it's not really a money issue. I just want to be clear. It's not a money issue. It's the actually getting a device into someone's hands that works. And it's not easy. It's not easy always to track people down. So there's a lot of other issues here, but 60,000 is the number that the mayor and the chancellor mentioned. So that's pretty scary.
Okay, thank you, Len, and thank you, Abby. Does that for now satisfy your question, or is that okay? Okay, and then Ms. Farquharson, you have a comment regarding the student meal plans and food insecurity.
Ms. Farquharson, if you could unmute yourself, state your name and your affiliation and your question.
Okay, hi, my name is Catherine Farquharson. I'm a graduate student at the CUNY Graduate School of Public Health. I'm not under Community Board 6. I'm further up in Community Board 9, but I did want to join today on the Health and Education Committee. Len, you pointed out some issues that I wasn't even aware of regarding the COVID-19 pandemic and the effects that it has had for, students and for parents. I'm not a parent myself, but, you pointed some things out that I wouldn't even think of, being an issue. But I wanted to make a comment as well as ask a question regarding the student meals. Food insecurity being a big thing in New York City, even prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, we had, 1.2 million New York City residents that were already food insecure. 1 in 5 students, were food insecure. You did mention public schools having the free breakfast and the free lunches still available. But I wanted to first and foremost ask you if you're aware of a local legislation by Jumaane Williams. It was proposed in August 2020, right during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Basically, what the proposed bill would do is secure those student meals, those breakfasts, those lunches, as well as include dinner. And it has a preparedness plan behind it that will include information for the public on how they can access those meals, distribution points, etc. So first and foremost, I wanted to ask if you were aware of the local legislation and your thoughts on it, and moving forward in the committee as well, not just Lynn, but the committee as well. What are you guys' thoughts on that food insecurity and those student meal plans?
Sure. That's such a great, the fact that there are kids that actually go hungry every single day in our city is so troubling. And it's true. People just don't have access to meals. I did want to say that the schools that are open, the schools that where you can go to get meals, you don't have to go back every single time for a meal. You can go in the morning and you can ask, and they will give you multiple meals. They will give you as many meals as you want, up to a certain, I forgot what the number is. There's a limitation on it. But if you have family members that need meals, we need to do a better job at feeding our families. And it, you don't think about it really when you're live on the Upper East Side or in Midtown or downtown in our communities. But food is a very basic requirement that it's not being met for a lot of people and people with families and kids. So I remember reading about something that was proposed. I don't know all the specifics. I think that's fantastic. If you could bring another meal and figure out a way to get that done, to have dinner. I mean, I think that's great, because our schools, it's not just the educational, it's not just the educational purpose they serve, but as I mentioned before, it is the serving of the meals, for example. I mean, that's so important to the members of our community, particularly.
Yeah, and when I was on the Community Education Council, the most difficult meeting of the year for me was when the people from the school, food, who actually feed the kids came, and it would make you cry to hear how many kids depend on the school for their one hot meal of the day. I mean, that was the saddest meeting of the year for me. Ms. Farquharson, do you have a link that you could put in the chat or email to the office about the public advocates proposed legislation? I know I heard of it, but I have to admit I'm not on top of it today as I might be.
And by the way, it's not just kids that can get meals, it's adults too. Adults can get meals too. So.
Okay, but thank you so much for raising
the schools serve the meals depending on whether the schools are open or closed. If the schools are open, you can pick up the meals in the morning at certain time periods, like after 9:30. They will give you the breakfast and they will give you lunch. If the schools are closed, then you have to pick up, and you have limited schools when the schools are closed. They preferably, like the high schools, will distribute lunch, but they will distribute to you. And depending on the people that you're getting the food from, they will allow you to pick up from 1 to 5 lunches. If you ask for them, they'll give them to you. There is a problem though. If you ask the schools to do dinner, then you're creating a whole different problem, a whole different scenario, because you're talking about storage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's easier for them to make lunches overnight, store them, and then hand them out in the morning. But if you're going from 1 to 2 to 3 meals a day, there is a difficulty involved.
Okay, so that's the sort of thing I guess that we have legislators for, to sort through and work out. So thank you. And Ms. Farquharson, thank you for bringing up this topic, because and Ms. Sarin as well, those are two issues that don't get enough attention. And thank you so much to both of you. Okay, so I think those are all the comments. I know we have one that's going to come up under new business from Ms. Connolly. Are there any other comments from the public? We're going a little over time tonight, but I think it's a topic. These are topics well worth taking a few extra moments on. So Jesus, does any other member of the public want to be recognized other than Ms. Connolly, whom we will get to?
No, that's it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to, because we are over time, going to waive my chair's report, but I will defer to the board chair, Kyle Attad, who is here, if he would like to take this occasion to make any comments. Kyle, would you like to fill in my chair's report time with anything you would like to speak about?
Nothing big. If anyone followed the executive committee meeting that we had the other week, one of the big changes that will be coming up in the new year is that we will be pulling out public health from this committee so that this committee can focus solely on education issues. So you'll be hearing more information about that. Most of you have been aware of that. So that's all I have on my end, but more details are forthcoming on that. But yeah, I liked everything I heard today.
Yeah, that was a very delicate way on my part of giving you a chance to make that announcement, but not make an announcement before you made it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to old and new business, and a member of the public, Lauren Connolly, a resident of Stuyvesant Town, has asked to speak in new business related on City Council Reso 0170-2018, calling upon the New York City Department of Education to offer kosher and halal meals in the summer meals program. Lauren, thank you for your patience. You have the floor for 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you so much. So again, I'm a resident of Stuytown, and similar to Catherine, I'm also a student of public health, and would like to discuss issues of food insecurity with you. So as was just mentioned, when schools are closed, there are a number of sites throughout the 5 boroughs where students can pick up the free meals that they are eligible for, including during the summer. But unfortunately, only 12 of those sites are certified to prepare kosher foods, and only 10 are certified to prepare halal foods. Meaning if you don't live near one of those sites, children keeping kosher or halal are offered a vegetarian grab-and-go meal at their local community pickup site instead of a freshly prepared religious-friendly meal. So for example, for us in Lower Manhattan, there are not any kosher or halal certified sites in our neighborhood, meaning that Muslim and Jewish children in our neighborhood need to travel to the nearest halal or kosher site, which is West 96th Street or in Brooklyn. So to address the need for inclusion of kosher and halal meals in the DOE, in 2018, a legislation was proposed by 2 New York City Council members calling upon the New York City DOE to offer kosher and halal meals in the summer meals program. Again, that's resolution 0170-2018. But since its introduction, the resolution has been held in committee. Fortunately, over the past year or so, the city has taken a few steps towards ensuring better access to kosher and halal meals. For example, the Kosher and Halal School Lunch Pilot Program that's currently underway through the Comptroller's Office, as well as the certification of those 22 sites that I mentioned in the beginning. But ensuring access to religious-friendly meals to children who may be food insecure needs legal protection, and I'm asking for this board support in helping move forward resolution 0170-2018 in any way that you can support it. And I'm interested in assessing if we think that our neighborhood could benefit from advocating for a kosher or halal site within our neighborhood so that there are more options to Jewish and Muslim children other than just a vegetarian grab-and-go option.
First of all, thank you very much. Do you know who sponsored 0170-2018? Do you know who the sponsors were?
Yes, it's Councilman Levine and Councilwoman Adams.
Okay. Well, I guess a good next step on this, first of all, that sounds like something that it would be hard to disagree with. And so why don't I, as chair of this committee, simply contact, first of all, our own, the city council members who districts cover the zone of Community Board 6, and get their views on this. And then this would sound like something that, we could easily put together a resolution in support of for the Community Board 6 to support. So, Laura, Lauren, is it Lauren or Laura? I apologize.
Laura, it's okay.
Okay. Could you, the office has your contact information, I believe, so you don't need to make that public. But why don't I and the office get back to you, and I will get in touch with the offices of our district council members, and see if they're, because that sounds like something that they would all be eager to support.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for waiting. And is there any old or new business that members of the committee or public would like to see us address? Seeing none, this has been a very interesting, productive, and useful meeting, I think, of the Health and Education Committee, and I was very happy to hear Kyle announce that we're going to be splitting health and education's parts of this committee, because I think that's a very good idea, and I know there's a lot of discussion that has to take place at the board as we do that. So seeing no other new business, I'm going to adjourn this meeting if there is no objection. So I'm adjourning the meeting at 7:45 p.m. Thank you, Len, very much for being here, and thanks to all the members of the public who were here as well and offered such valuable comments. There were several topics that were, I'm just delighted to hear getting on, getting airtime. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you all. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.